Welcome to the Becoming Body Smart podcast, where we unlock the secrets of sustainable health and fitness and help you master your health habits. If you're tired of quick fixes, generic blueprints, and chasing short-term results, you're in the right place. It's time to become Body Smart.
Hey Marty, hey Lori. The beach is better today. That's great.
Nice.
It's always good when you have good beachy weather. We always like it. All right, here we go. So, we got a comment rolling in. And just letting everybody get in. The neck. Oh, okay, the neck. I was like, I didn't think you had gone on a beach trip, so I was kind of surprised. That's funny. I was like,
well, the beach somewhere is better today.
Yeah. So that shocked me, or I was just like, did I know about this trip? I don't remember her talking about going somewhere.
I was just going along.
Mark was like, sweet.
Someone's at the beach, awesome.
Mark was just jealous that he wasn't at the beach.
True.
Well, I was jealous that I wasn't at the beach.
Well, I don't know.
Too.
I wouldn't want to be at a Pacific beach right now. Atlantic, that would be nice.
That's true. Pacific beaches right now are cold.
So cold. They're always cold, but especially now.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a weird aside.
How do we segue that one into zone training?
So zone training. So
when you're running on the beach.
When you're running on the beach, what zone should you stay in?
Wait, hold on. I have a story about that one time.
Okay.
So I was on a beach vacation with some family, and I went out in the morning and I ran, but I didn't run I did like a mile running on the beach, and it was really cool. And so I went back and I told everyone, I was like, oh, it was so awesome. Like, you got to run on the beach. It feels great. And the problem was that everyone that went running ran like, it was 3 or 4 miles. And so it just wrecked their feet and their calves the rest of the day.
Right.
Like, they were hating me. I was like, I'm sorry, I only went a mile. It was great. It felt great. Yeah.
That's the thing.
Blisters,
a lot of the time people will think like, I'm going to go do my regular run. And it's like, oh no, it's a whole different sport.
Yeah.
And so, you definitely have to curb expectations on how far you're going to run on the beach or walk on the beach.
So anyway.
That's funny. Mark ruined the whole family vacation. That's funny. All right. So today we wanted to talk about the zones. So we talk a lot about zone 2 training, right? Why it's so important and
your bobblehead right there.
Yeah, there you go. And just why zone training is critical and why we use that method and all those things. We wanted to dive into it a little bit deeper today so that we could get the benefits of each zone and explain why we really do prefer working out 80% in zones 1 and 2, predominantly zone 2, and then the other 20% in zones 4 and 5. What the benefits of each of them are, why we want to avoid zone 3, why we call it the no progress zone. Some call it, junk miles. We prefer more no progress zone. We want to dispel the fact that it's bad, because it's not necessarily bad for you to work out in zone 3. It's just not a zone where you're going to see any progress, and there are some risks to it as well. So it's not necessarily bad. It's just not really...
It's just conditionally bad.
Yeah, it's conditionally bad. Well, it just... in my, I guess, way of thinking, just why spend time in a zone that doesn't really move the needle anywhere? It's not going to get you better.
Yeah.
So it's not bad. It's just not moving anywhere. And as long as you're spending the time, you might as well be doing something that helps you move forward.
Yeah.
And so we've talked before, ad nauseum about if you're not progressing, then you're really backsliding. That maintenance doesn't happen. That maintenance is a lie, right? We've talked about that before. And so that's the idea. Zone 3 is kind of more of a maintenance zone, but with some risks to it. And so maintaining is just declining slower.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this goes back to what we say about a lot of things, right? We kind of come on strong like, don't do this, right? But it's really, what's the most effective use of your time?
Right.
And when we just look at zone training from a big picture perspective, it's going back again to what were we evolutionarily adapted for, and it was for like kind of low-level movement throughout the day with short bursts of speed, and that mimics exactly what we suggest with zone training, right?
Right.
Of like the majority in zone 2, right? That like you're moving, but it's comfortable, and then like when you need to chase some prey or you're running away from a predator or something like that, right? You got to get that top end speed,
Right.
And so both of those, like our body was adapted to that over thousands of years, and so in training it that way, we I guess train our body within its purposes.
Right. So yeah, exactly. So like you stalk an animal, and then there's this quick burst of activity while you take the animal, and then you have the processing of the animal. Like when we're talking about Aboriginal people and kind of how that worked, you're going, mostly low intensity through the whole hunt, and then all of a sudden burst of activity, and then you have like heavy things you have to lift and move and whatever. Same thing with the harvest though. You're farming all year long, and it's like planting the seeds, hoeing and tilling, and just prepping the ground and keeping it going, and it's mostly low level activity. All of a sudden harvest time comes along, and you're gathering up heavy baskets and bushels of stuff, and so all of a sudden you need bigger strength and bigger power and more speed, or whatever it is occasionally, but most of the time it's just slow, steady movement. Harvesting and things like that, even the gatherers were still like just slowly picking a bushel full, but then they had to carry that bushel back. And so, it's this balance of all those things. And so that sets the stage for how we're built now, and why training, fairly intensely for 45 minutes and then sitting at a desk the rest of the day just doesn't seem to work for us very well. And why the average person, even though they're super consistent and I do these things, but if they lead a pretty sedentary lifestyle outside of their workouts, will often not see continued success. And it's because we're not using our zones to our advantage, and we're not using our lifestyle to be an active lifestyle. We have a mostly passive lifestyle. And so we'll talk about the different benefits of the zones and why that active lifestyle is where the real secret to all of it is. So,
yeah.
All right. Do we want to start at the bottom or the top?
Let's start at the top.
So at zone 5?
Let's start
okay.
at zone 5.
We always start at zone 1. So
I know.
I like it. Okay.
Okay. Switch it up today.
Did you have something to say before? Okay.
I don't remember what it was.
Okay, well, then let's move on.
Because it wasn't that important.
Yeah, I guess not. All right, so zone 5. Zone 5 is awesome for its benefits and miserable for trying to sustain zone 5. But that's kind of the point. It should be uncomfortable. So I like to break down all 5 zones into kind of 3 main zones. The uncomfortable zone, which is zone 5, and 4 and 5 is the uncomfortable zone. The comfortably uncomfortable zone, which is kind of like low end of zone 4 and zone 3. And then the comfortable zone is zones 1 and 2, where it's comfortable. I could be here all day. The comfortable zone is like, or the comfortably uncomfortable zone is I could do this for half hour to an hour and a half, that kind of zone, kind of where most of us tend to work out most of the time. And then the uncomfortable is typically like seconds to minutes. So, a well-trained athlete can sustain zone 4 for longer periods of time, but most of us, it's a few minutes to a few seconds in zone 5. Yeah.
I think I'm on that few seconds.
Right. 30 to 60 seconds of zone 5. And you can build that up to where people can run a mile or two, like all out maximal in intensity. You see some of the races now and 5Ks or cross country races at the collegiate level or whatever they're going full bore pretty much the whole time. Some of the athletes now are like almost a dead sprint for the full time, which is wild.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
Well, that reminds me of the story that you told when you were in grad school and you were doing were you doing the Wingate test?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I did a VO2 max
Okay, so it's
when
the
I
VO2
just about
maxes.
died.
Yeah, when you just about died, right?
Yeah.
Is like the difference between trained and untrained.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
And he probably just wasn't spending very long in his zone 5 because
No, or
like he was
any zone at
in
that
zone,
point.
right? Because he was right.
Right.
And so, but yeah, like trying to sustain that for a long time. One, we don't need to. Like we can get the benefits in those short bursts, right? In seconds to like maybe a minute in zone 5, right? Or a little bit longer if you're on that top end. But this is where again those top end performance benefits come, right? One, my ability to use my strength quickly, right? So that power component improves. My ability to, and this goes along with the next point of using our tendons for some of the energy. That's developed there too. What I mean by that is that if we can use our tendons kind of like that trampoline spring, then that's less energy our body has to use, right? Because as we stretch that out, it stores energy, and then as it goes back to its original state, it releases energy without us having to do anything extra, right? Without the brain having to divert any extra energy into that area. And so we can become more efficient at that. Our bodies, again, over time, get better at dealing with some of those metabolic byproducts that shut us down, right? If you've ever done like a really crazy intense workout and you feel like you're going to throw up, that's what I'm talking about, right? Our blood actually gets more acidic as those build up in our system, and our brain's like, hey, my job is to preserve you, so we're going to shut this down, right?
Yeah.
But we can actually get better at buffering that over time.
You build up a tolerance to that discomfort as well as your body gets better at clearing it.
Yeah, so I think that's a good point, right? The physical, you get physical improvements, but also mental improvements of just being able to deal with the hard.
Right. Well, and your body actually like goes, oh, we've done this before. We're not actually going to die.
Oh, yeah. Well, and this is fascinating. So my brother is just such a funny case study when it comes to certain forms of exercise. But he loves mountain biking. His favorite part is the uphill, which I'm like, you're insane. You're not human. But he, like, to be able to just mentally endure the pain, he craves it. That's one of the things that he loves. And so being able to develop that capacity actually can be very helpful, not just for like doing the exercise, but for being able to just handle tough things. Right?
Yeah, it builds up that mental endurance or that mental, ability to struggle, because life, it's going to get all of us at some point in time where we have some struggles. So
true story.
And it's a great way to work some of our struggles out. Going all out maximal effort allows you to kind of get those endorphin releases and even kind of that runner's high or whatever, that exerciser's high, can help release some of that when you really push hard, and allows you to get out some of that aggression and things. But that's why Zone 5 is so transformational for your body. Not only is it beneficial in improving the metabolics of our system, but we're really improving our mechanics as well. So to be able to go faster, your gait mechanics and other things like that naturally have to improve to become more efficient to go faster. So the more time you spend in Zone 5, within reason, right? But the more you're able to really push yourself when you push yourself, the top end of Zone 5, that's going to give you a little bit of added benefit in terms of improving your overall efficiency of movement and things like that, because you're having to figure out what movements are most efficient for my body. And it's not necessarily a conscious thing. We just, to get that next little bit faster, we wind up adapting naturally. And so that's some of the benefits of Zone 5 is it improves our top end performance. One of the reasons why Zone 3, and we'll talk more about this, isn't as beneficial is it's within a range that we can already do. I can already run that fast. I can already go that hard. It's not, it's comfortably uncomfortable. And so it's not really pushing me to improve, because I'm in my comfort zone. And so by pushing outside of that, that's where we see more physiological growth. It releases the types of cytokines or chemical kind of markers in our system that optimize the right types of development. And so that's Zone 5 is so good at that. And Zone 4 does that as well.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more sustainable, so we can practice enduring the suffering maybe a little bit longer. So the benefits of that is we still are running faster than we can sustain. So we're having to build that mechanical efficiency. But we get a little bit more of the metabolic benefit, I would say, in zone 4 because we are able to sustain that a little bit longer.
Yeah, so our body has different energy systems that it uses primarily for these different zones.
Yeah.
So zone 4 and 5, right? It's relying more on your carbohydrates, right? What's stored in your muscles, and then some other chemicals that are kind of fast release that are stored in the muscles first, right?
Yeah,
They can kind of
fast twitch glycolytic.
Yeah, all those fun pathways.
Right.
And so that's the thing is that to improve performance in all of the areas, we need to train each of these systems. And zone 4 and zone 5 do that exquisitely well. But yeah, like Cameron said, it allows you a little bit more of that endurance benefit. One of the big things to caution about this is we don't want to overdo this, right? It's that dose response curve. And what I mean by that is that too much of a good thing can be harmful.
Right.
And so you see so much stuff out of there that's high intensity, right? All the benefits of high intensity. And again, we've gone over many of those benefits of high intensity, but it's our body only needs that in short doses, right? It doesn't take a bunch, like Cameron said, those chemical messengers. It doesn't take a bunch to signal the adaptations that improve our performance, that improve our efficiency, that improve our body's ability to handle those waste products.
And what they found is that more of those signaling molecules don't necessarily mean added benefit.
Right.
There's a limit to how much our body can kind of keep up with. And so more of that actually just leads to more injury and increases our risk of problems.
Exactly. So both, they say bones get bored and tendons get bored. And so, again, with the high intensity, there is still some of that benefit for tendon in what we call a stretch shortening cycle, is that ability to use the elasticity of the tendon well and preserve some of our energy. But in terms of just like the big adaptations that we want to see, those tend to occur with strength training when we're doing those things in smaller doses. But yeah, like injury goes up huge. It goes up exponentially when we overweight the high intensity end of the spectrum. Mm-hmm. Because again, we're going at the top of our body's ability. We're chasing stuff that our body isn't necessarily great at yet, right? So like Cameron mentioned, zone 3 is stuff that we can already do, but zone 4 and 5, that's starting to push the envelope, especially with zone 5. And so we do want some amount of reaching past our current abilities, right? That's how we improve in any area of our health. But it's are we reaching in sustainable ways? Are we reaching in counterproductive ways? Mm-hmm. Again, that's that same dose response curve in which case it's like, yeah, I love high intensity, it makes me feel good, I feel so cool, but I just for some reason keep going from injury to injury to injury. Right. And so we need to do that enough that our body has a signal to adapt, but also not too much so that our body has the ability to recover. Because recovery is where our body actually makes the changes. That's where the adaptations actually occur, is in recovery, not during the workout. Workout signals the changes. Recovery is where the changes actually take place.
Yeah, I love that. So injury, we've used this analogy before of kind of injury is, imagine you had a pitcher of water that has a spigot at the bottom that you can release and let that water flow out. So the accumulated load on our body flows out as we recover. So that kind of signals how quickly we can recover. So if we're doing all the good things for recovery and that valve is all the way open, so as we dump load into the system, into this, pitcher with the valve at the bottom, we're dumping load into the system. If we keep that valve all the way open so that recovery is good, but we still spend too much time in zone 3 where the load is higher, and then we add on zone 4 and 5 intensity at too high of a volume, or even just at the normal volume. If you're doing your 80-20 where 80% is in zone 3 and then 20% is zone 4 and 5, you're going to overflow, and that's going to create an injury versus the controlled recovery, right? And so that's essentially the problem with zone 3 training, is it puts too much load without those adaptive benefits. And so it's kind of in this not sweet spot where it's not that it's bad for you per se, it's just a higher amount of load than we often can keep up with. And so we wind up training fewer days in the week or other things like that to be able to recover. And so then our total training load or training volume is less, even though our total training volume, number of minutes or miles run, is less, but the amount of load that we're putting on ourselves is more. And so by not hanging out so much in zone 3, where really the only benefits are just general cardiovascular maintenance. It doesn't put quite enough load on the tendon to really help it build up. It puts some load on the tendon, but kind of at a range and a frequency of repetition that it got bored already, but not enough of a stimulus to really build it up much stronger. And so it's just not enough stimulus to get it stronger or more, build endurance or build the mechanics of it and all those things. And so it just winds up putting a lot of unnecessary load. And then if we add the speed work on top of it, that's where most people get injured. Whereas if we are able to go in that 80% of our time in the zone 2 and below, then that load we're able to manage and keep it flowing out properly. And we still can add on the heavier load of the zone 4 and 5, and we're okay. Yeah. Hopefully that analogy makes sense, but we like that one.
What we always tell people about zone 3 is, one, those general cardiovascular benefits, you get those in all of the zones. And so again, like if you're doing the zone 1, 2 training, zone 4, 5 training, like you're not going to miss out on anything by not spending a bunch of time there.
Right. The cardiovascular benefits are going to be there either way.
Yeah. And then the other thing is, like Cameron mentioned, is because it's kind of in this middle-ish range, it's a little bit too much like zone 4 and 5, and it's a little bit too much like zone 2. And so, we're not getting the benefits of either side, and we're just depleting that energy reserve.
Yeah, all of our reserves, right? So we're more fatigued, we're more depleted, so we need more calories, we need more building blocks to build back up and things like that.
Yeah.
So Marty asked a good question in here of, when do you change your heart rate zones? If you feel like your zones have shifted. So my Garmin tells me that my heart rate threshold has increased. Do I use that, or do I do my age minus 180? I would say use the Garmin range would be better than the heart rate or your age minus 180. I would say the best would be, if you feel like your zones have shifted, come in and get another metabolic test so we can tell you exactly where your zone should be. Because all of those are estimates. The Garmin does a decent job, but it's still going to be off for the individual. And so coming in and getting tested, doing a metabolic test, we can tell you exactly where those zones should be. So Marty, you probably have seen a recent shift with all of your training, for Ironman, for Kona and everything. So that would be a good idea for this winter training, getting ready for Boston, to have another metabolic test done so that we can dial all of those things in and see where your zones should be so that you can train appropriately in your zones, especially if you're like shifting more toward running and not going to cycle as much in the winter as you have been for Ironman, cycle and swim. Then dialing those zones in for your running would be ideal. So.
Yeah. One more thing that I want to say about zone 3 real quick. Is what Cameron mentioned, right, is the increased injury risk. So sometimes injuries occur quickly, right? I jump off a 20-foot cliff and I break my shin bones, right? But I would say more often the case is it's progressive over time, right? It seems to like come on out of nowhere. And so the problem is that when we're training in that way that's kind of exhausting our resources, it happens without us really recognizing that.
Right.
And so it's just this like slow kind of downhill progress until like, oh man, that's painful, or oh, that hurts,
right.
or right, like a full-blown injury or something like that.
Right, and we normally notice people will say things when we talk to them about it and interview them about it. We'll normally notice they'll say stuff like, I just wasn't progressing. I kind of plateaued for a little while, and I was training for X, Y, or Z, and I wanted to push myself to get a time or whatever. So I went and did some speed work, and it was during the speed workout that I really felt that hamstring or really felt that whatever. And that tends to be the thing is we spend a lot of time in this zone 3 because we want to get faster, and then we try to pile on even more time. So we increase our mileage or we increase the intensity because we want to improve and we feel like we're plateauing. And we just add onto the load. Versus when we run in zone 2, what that allows you to be able to do is actually get more time on your feet, more time under load, and more mileage in or things like that, because you can train on more successive days because the amount of load per workout is less. So it's similar to why running with a faster cadence is actually less impact. So with every step you have what's called the peak impact force, so the amount of force that you hit the ground with. And the slower we run, or not slower pace-wise, but the slower number of steps per minute we take, actually the amount of force we absorb with each step increases quite a bit. So the faster you can have that turnover, the faster you can take those steps per minute, actually the less overall force you absorb within the same distance. And so kind of the same idea with training in a zone 2 at a slower pace, at a lower heart rate range. The actual amount of load that we take with increased pace or increased intensity of exercise is somewhat exponential, meaning the harder you work out, the more that load grows. And so by working out at a lighter pace, we actually, the load for the same amount of distance is quite a bit less, or the same amount of time on our feet is quite a bit less. And so that allows us to be able to do the activity more frequently and spend more time under load, which creates better adaptation, but without overloading the system.
Yeah. So a great example is a conversation I actually had yesterday with a patient of she had switched over to, like, she's been doing a lot of slow running, right?
Yeah.
And it was difficult at first because the number of miles that she was able to do per day dropped. But she said, I actually found myself, just this thing, I found myself, like, across the week, I was actually the same mileage as before, but after I finished my run, I felt like I could go on another run that day, right? I felt a lot better.
And that's the point.
And that's the point. And she also said that, like, she'd been looking at her cadence and had been trying to focus on getting that a little bit higher, and that just now naturally, like, every time she checked in, wasn't looking at it all the time, but would check in, and it just kind of hovered around a good sweet spot for her. And so that was really cool. It's always fun to hear the changes and, like, how it actually, it's great to talk about in theory, but how is it doing in application? And it's always fun to see, like, the different things that people highlight or recognize and how much it changes their experience. And so I think that's sometimes the difficult thing is like Cameron mentioned, for most people that zone 3 is that it's comfortably uncomfortable, right? We're okay spending time there. And
we want to feel like we got a good workout.
And we want to feel like we got a good workout, right? And that is one of the, like, that sentiment has led to probably more injuries than almost anything else, right? Like, totally. that I've just got to push harder, right? I got to feel like I had a workout. And I would say
the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
The road to good intentions.
No, anyway.
But I think this actually goes back to a point, and this is why this type of training can be difficult. Cameron mentioned before that, like, we can use, running, especially at high intensity, as a way to help regulate our emotional state. And so what some people find is that when they can't push as hard, it doesn't feel like it's meeting that need in the same way, right?
They're not getting the runner's high.
They're not getting the runner's high. And to me, what that signals is, okay, like, not that you can't use, running or exercise or whatever to help regulate your. There's great data that shows that it improves mood, that it can be as effective as cognitive behavioral therapy and as antidepressants in helping to regulate mood, right? So some really robust effects. But one, if your exercise is leaving you unable to recover, then it really isn't serving your mental health in the end. Yeah. And two, like, if that's kind of the primary coping mechanism, then that's a great chance to reflect and say, okay, are there some some different avenues that I could use to help me cope? Are there people that I could reach out to that would maybe be able to give me some ideas and help me expand my toolbox so that I can use exercise in both ways, right? To help regulate my emotions, but also to make progress and to become more resilient.
Yeah, so the benefits.
That's a large aside.
Well, no, that's great. I mean, so the benefits are just so great for exercise just in general, right? It can do so much for us. And so the key is, how do I get as much of it as I can and still stay safe, right? And not have things set me back. And so the more I can get in, the more calories that I can burn, the more I feel good, the more I can do all the things that I love to do and want to do and all those things. So how do I get more in so I can do it logistically, so I can do it safely, so I can, build up those habits? And the thing is it doesn't have to be always sweating a puddle, hard, high intensity stuff. Most of the time in zones 1 and 2, and then some specific workouts where we kick it up higher. But where we really see people, live the happiest, healthiest lifestyle and maintain their body weight the best and things like that is not necessarily the person that works out the hardest. Mm-hmm. It's the person that's the most consistent and then lives the active lifestyle so that they're getting a lot of movement in often just zone 1 or zone 2 things where they're just doing all the time because their workouts didn't make it so hard for them to live an active lifestyle that they can go out and do the fun things in life, that they can go and do activities that they enjoy and spend time with the people that they enjoy and just keep moving, move more and sit less because their workouts didn't gas them so much that they, earned couch time and sat there and watched Netflix instead of getting up and doing. And so that really is the key, that spending more of our time in zone 1 and 2 and just moving throughout the majority of our day is going to burn way more calories overall because we're able to do it sustainably. And even just a small bump up in our calorie burn for the other 14 hours that we're awake in the day is going to burn way more calories. If it's just a 50 calorie or 100 calorie per hour bump in our calorie burn, then we're talking, massive amounts of calories burned compared to our, 500 or 600 calories we burned in one workout.
Yeah.
And so, it just adds up so much more exponentially if we live that active lifestyle. And so that zone 1, zone 2 time is so, so important. And it's where a lot of the changes in terms of lifestyle actually come from. And then the changes in our body often come more from that zone 4 and zone 5 short measured bouts of higher intensity.
But it's interesting, you're talking, I was thinking about, talking about calories and how we use them differently in those zones. There's also a difference in what those calories mean in kind of zone 1, 2 versus 3, 4, 5. And more of that zone 2 training can actually help you make better choices. What I mean by that is because we're burning a higher percentage of fat calories in those lower zones, those are ones that we don't get that same drive to eat back. Right? When we're burning those carbohydrate calories, that's not a bad thing, but our brain is going to signal hunger more readily. And so it's easier, if we're spending a bunch of time in those higher zones and we're burning a bunch more carbohydrate, then our brain's going to be like, hey, you got to, I need this storage, you got to eat this back.
Right.
And so it's kind of the same thing of like eating something like quick carbs, right, that spike our blood sugar really fast, and then we release a bunch of insulin to shoot it back down, right, versus like something that's a little more complex that keeps our blood sugar levels a little bit more steady. It's the same idea with this, is if we're just getting this huge drop in carbohydrates and then this huge signal to eat something to replace those, it's much easier to choose those quick sources, right? Like, oh, let me just grab a handful of Doritos, or I'm going to do a quick bowl of cereal or whatever.
Yeah.
And again, not that any of those choices are bad, but like, can we make more choices more often that are in line with the way that we want to feel, that we want to perform, and the way that we want to look too. I think that's important to recognize.
Right. And the confidence that we want to have with our body to be able to do the things we want to do and feel the way we want to feel about it. Yeah. I mean, we could go off on this topic so much. So, because that just opened up the whole like calorie can of worms of like why we store so many fewer carbohydrate calories than fat calories, and why, you know, I was just thinking as you were talking about the analogy of like a hybrid car, that the battery power versus the gas, engine, and that you can get incredible mileage out of the gasoline, but you can get incredible, bursts of speed and power and whatever. But it takes a lot longer to recharge up that short burst energy stuff, whereas the slow energy, like you just pump it full of gas again. And the same thing is kind of true with our body. We have a massive reservoir of fat, and it's easy to get fat stores to build back up. Whereas our carbohydrate reserves, because that's so foundational in our kind of energy systems, in our fight or flight response, in maintaining our blood sugar and managing stress and all those types of things, it's such a critical component that if we don't manage that well, we wind up bonking hard. So anyway, so we could go totally into all of that as well, but we're kind of out of time. And topic for another day. But we'll have to chat about the calorie balance and all those things. We have before, I know, but
we have, and we'll be posting an infographic about this topic soon, about the defining the zones and kind of broad overview of everything that we talked about today on the call.
Yeah, that helped kind of outline what each zone is for, why, the benefits, the risks, and kind of how to use each zone. So hopefully that'll be helpful. Okay, thanks so much, and we'll catch you on the call on Monday. It's Thursday. All right, we'll see you then.
Thanks for listening to the Becoming Body Smart podcast. If you have questions, thoughts, or want to continue the conversation, reach out to us on our socials or join our community. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps us bring you even more valuable content. Remember, sustainable health is a lifelong journey, and we're here to support you every step of the way. Live longer, live stronger, and become body smart.